Welcome, everybody. My name is Michael, and today we're discussing about, well, everyone's asking, what happened with banking? Why are you no longer a banker? Well, I don't think banking's for me. I don't know if the corporate life is for me, or maybe, because it's tough to gauge it from retail banking. There's a difference between banking and retail banking, and that's for sure. And I did not have the greatest time. I went to two banks in a span of 4 months. One was only for 3 weeks. The other one was 3 months. And essentially what happened was there was one bank I was applying to, and now I guess I can share it, whatever. I was applying to JP Chase. I wanted to be a private banker. And before I even applied for relationship banker or anything, back when I still had my job at the dealership, I went for an interview and they said, you know what, we're not looking for bankers, we're looking for salesmen. And with your experience, you're certainly going to get here. You know, there's a lot for you to learn. There's certain things you're going to have to pass, like the SIE and the Series 6, 66, and whatnot, life insurance. And I said, no problem. I can learn. I'm a student right now, finishing my degree, hopefully here within the next 8 months. So they like that. They like the fact that I will have a degree soon. They like that I have 3 years of sales experience. They like that I had some marketing experience. They were looking for an outsider, someone who will be agreeable, someone who's hardworking, someone who's motivated to make some money here, someone who has a lot of sales experience or decent amount of sales experience, because in comparison to the average banker, the average teller, the average relationship banker that gets hired, most of these people are afraid to pick up the phones. Most of these people are afraid to walk up to the customers. And coming from car sales, well, it's one of the big three: car sales, telephone sales, B2B, not B2B, B2C sales inside the stores and malls and whatnot, and then knocking on doors. Those three are the big ones where it's like, okay, if you know how to do that, you're going to have no problem with a little bit of cold calling and warm leads and greeting grandpa and grandma who are trying to open up a checking account and maybe selling them in a HELOC. Well, there's different levels. The relationship banker would be the primary banker, who then would be able to give it to the private banker, who is more focused on, hey, this is an established family account with maybe over $250,000, maybe over 200, maybe over 500,000. Each bank is slightly different, but with Chase, I think it was 250,000. And you would be focused more on investing arms and working with different partners, such as the financial analyst. And you'd have an expert with mortgages. You'd have an expert for, depending on the size of accounts. At my 3 months with the larger bank here, which was a competitor to Chase, which was still it's the second largest in the Midwest, where Chase was the first largest in the Midwest. I saw situations where there were accounts that were in the millions, and sometimes you'd have to go into the private bank sector, which is one step above the at least with that bank that I was working at. The private bank, there was premier banking and whatnot. The premier banker was kind of like the private client banker and Chase. There's always that person who's going to be working with these massive corporate accounts, right? So there's the corporate side of things. There's the massive family and trust and billionaire accounts and whatnot. I mean, if someone has $5 million sitting in a checking and savings account, obviously a special account, but, and has a couple million in stocks and a couple million here, obviously they have a lot more money in other accounts and banks and stocks and crypto and gems and real estate and whatnot. Now, most of those people were also 90 years old, but they're going to soon pass away, as I've seen. In just my short time at the bank, there was plenty of people who, there was a lot of time spent on trusts and, hey, someone's deceased, my dad's deceased, my mom's deceased, something happened, how do we get this money, I'm sure that's a day-to-day basis, week-to-week basis with most of these bankers. So basically, I was promised not guaranteed. I was told there was a very good chance I could become a private client banker. And I said, all right, I understand this process is going to be a long one. They said 2 months, probably, maybe even longer. I understood that I would have to apply for other banking positions, and not everyone would automatically want to do private or premier banking, because someone with no banking experience, just because this one manager said he prefers people with no banking experience because they're not jaded, doesn't mean that the rest will want that. The rest will probably want a bachelor's or even master's degree. The rest will want to see that you have that SIE pass, because then it's less risk for them if, hey, you need the Series 6, 66, 7 life insurance. If you passed one of them, the hardest of them, you're going to pass the others, no problem, because they have to pay for training. They have to fire you if you don't do it in the specified amount of time. With Chase, it was 6 months or less. And eventually, what happened was I had 9 different interviews with Chase, and applications in different branches and different managers and regional managers and vice presidents and directors and whatnot, and every single time was rejected. The first manager who said very positive things, and I had a second interview after that with his boss, well, they stopped responding. And part of the reason probably they stopped responding, I called them, I emailed, I called the other manager, emailed. I, didn't overdo it, didn't spam, but just wanted to show, hey, I'm still interested. Waited the 2 weeks, waited, the specified amounts of times that were recommended. And maybe due to liability, they probably found a better candidate. I eventually found a different manager who was willing to interview, and he said probably the real reason, whether it's relationship banker or private banker at Chase, it was the same thing. It's just depending on the percentages later on. You would get paid commission and a salary, but the salary would be the same for both. The commission, you had unlimited upside. Well, there's limits, but less limits if you're a private client banker compared to a relationship banker. So let's say the relationship banker anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000, depending on the area, maybe up to $100,000. Where the private client banker is probably from 80 to 120, maybe even some of the top performers 150,000 plus. And with that, essentially, you have the same playing field where you have a bunch of candidates interviewing, and most of them already have the SIE path, and you're the one that's, other people who are in a much better position already. Now, this manager told me, hey, here's what you got to do. If you're already working in banking, which at the time, this was when I did quit, I resigned from my dealership job. I went to one bank. I said, I just started this position. I will be gaining banking experience, and I've also applied for learning for the SIE. I bought a course, I was learning, and I was planning to take it within the next couple months. He said, listen, if you're able to pass the SIE and you've got banking experience in a couple months, that's going to elevate you to the same position where these other candidates are. And then with your sales experience, you potentially could get that position. Maybe not private client banker, but maybe relationship banker. And I said, okay, that's fine. I did also apply to Bank of America. I applied to pretty much all the big banks. I got rejected with Bank of America like 4, 5, 6 times. Again, most of these were just because it's different branches, different locations, different districts. The first bank I went to was a smaller bank. It was a local bank, kind of Midwestern bank. It was a bank mainly in Wisconsin. Never heard of it in my life, honestly, until I started working there. And they said, you're going to be a banker, relationship banker. But their idea of relationship banker was you're basically a glorified teller. The first 3 weeks were terrible. They have this system where you're going to get graded. It felt like going back to school where you have to, the training period would be like 3-4 months. You can't make any commissions. You'd still have to do some cold calling and then work at bank. A lot of these banks have work at bank, bank at work, where you go from business to business. You're basically knocking on doors and saying, hey, if you're a small local company, I'd like to present to your employees here, usually businesses with Hispanic populations or populations that don't necessarily have SSNs, potentially illegal immigrants, because some banks don't accept that, some banks do, especially for a smaller local bank trying to get everybody you can. They highly recommend that. And I said, I don't know if I want to do that, because I thought a banker just sitting at the bank, you're not making cold calling, like complete cold calls. At the dealership, you were never cold calling. You were making warm calls, maybe someone who was a little bit chilly, 5 years ago, but they were interested in a vehicle then, or they serviced with you a couple of years ago, or they might still have the car that, the salesman who left 2 years ago, but sold them 3 cars over the past decade. There's different scenarios where you were never just cold calling, like a lawyer who never heard of your company, right? Or they never had a bank account in this scenario. I was given lists at both banks where, hey, this is what you're going to have to do. At the first bank, I talked with the employees and they said they were miserable. So that was red flag number 1. The employees said they were miserable and they told me, hey, this is going to get worse. And I was like, okay, great. They paid less than a lot of the other offers. So that was red flag number 2. Red flag number 3 was the training period, where it basically was similar to high school. They treated you in this weird fashion, and it's tough to explain, but basically you were treated like a child with a lot of micromanaging and a toxic environment. That was red flag number 3. And the red flag number 4 is basically they decided, hey, let's get rid of teller positions. You're going to be the teller. And then also if a client walks in and wants to set up an account, 10% of the time you'll be the relationship banker, 90% of the time you'll be the teller. So I knew at this point, I was still waiting on Chase. I didn't realize they would say no and whatnot. But I did get this second bank, which is a lot better, had better benefits, was paying a lot more. They said, no, you're not going to be a teller. There's no need to be a teller. We have multiple part-time tellers. I said, yeah, why not? So I quit that immediately within 3 weeks and went to the other bank. It was a nice smooth transition. The first month was super easy. It was a lot of training. Was reading up about the company. There was a lot of great things. It seemed like this is going to be it. This is going to be the position I was looking for. And later on, I can switch to Chase once I have the experience, or here at this bank, I can become a premier banker. Well, little did I know that after a month, it turned into pure chaos. They had so many meetings on top of meetings. You would have to come in before and sometimes stay after for meetings. There was meetings pretty much every single day. Sometimes the manager would be in on like 5, 6, 7, 8 meetings. So they didn't have enough time to train you. The training was basically just watch a bunch of videos, and then once the videos are done, hey, you're just kind of tossed out into the open, and you're supposed to really figure things out super quick, because if not, we have goals to meet. There was so many meetings because there were so many goals. There was weekly goals, monthly goals, there was quarterly goals, the big goals, right? And this is where you get some commissions, but these commissions weren't huge. We're talking about a difference of a couple $1,000s at the end of the year. Yes, you would have annual bonuses, you would have quarterly bonuses, but that's if you maxed everything out, right? So chances are pretty small of that happening. And realistically, it was a couple grand we were talking about. And what happened was I was sent to a branch, and it all depends on which branch you get sent to. I was sent to a branch that did bad the previous quarter because the previous banker, don't know what happened to him. He left or resigned or went somewhere else. We don't know. Maybe he had a bad experience. And there was another banker who moved and was still with the company, but basically they lost both their bankers, and I was the only one there. So someone who's a complete newbie, the manager's overworked, go into a quarter where it was already bad and my training period started, and then the new quarter starts. I finished my training and they're like, hey, you got to make up for basically what happened here. And by make up, I mean literally make up. We were starting negative in terms of points. The CRC goals and SRC or whatever, we were negative like 30,000 points, and we had to make up for it with different home equity lines of credit. I mean, basically my first week after training, I was cold calling for HELOC loans without even really knowing what a HELOC was. That went kind of decent. I talked with some people. We were able to get some interest, but I felt it was a little weird that, hey, I'm going to be basically glorified salesman even more. I thought I'd be a banker and helping people, but really the number one thing is sales. And it's pretty much more salesy than the dealership in some aspects. And I'd be getting paid the same or less. It didn't make sense at that point. So that's when I realized this is probably not for me. And then it went downhill. There was so much micromanaging that by the end of it, the manager decided to sit outside of her office right next to mine, looking over the shoulder and everything. And I did not enjoy that. It was a toxic environment, and you could tell that some of the other employees were also not too pleased with the situation. The manager was also in that scenario because her manager was also on her because, hey, these points, these goals, you got to hit. You got to exceed these goals. It's not just you have to hit 100%. You have to hit 200, 300%. And if you're hitting 30, 40% of that, forget the fact that it's not even my fault that I walked into a burning scenario the past couple months where, I wasn't even working there, but I have to make up for that. It was a rough time. Not a lot of people coming into the bank who necessarily want HELOCs and loans, and given with what's going on in the world right now. So eventually I realized it's not for me. The benefits, yeah, they're kind of nice. You have paid holidays, PTO and whatnot, but I decided to go back to the dealership. Not the previous one I was at, a different one. This one I went to, I applied for sales. I applied for just any position. They said, well, the floor is flooded. There's too many salesmen. You can go into online sales. So that's where I'm at right now. And it's a lot less stressful, a lot less, man. There's no micromanaging. There's no toxic environment. Again, just started, so we'll see how it goes. But so far, so good. And for a dealership, they actually have better benefits than my previous dealerships. They actually have a decent amount of paid holidays, 6 paid holidays, compared to some of the other dealerships, only 2 or 1 or whatnot. PTO is a little bit better as well. Still nothing compared to the bank, but I don't care if there's 17 PTO days if, every day you're going to work, it's a terrible experience. So, am I crossing out banking for good? 80 to 90% yes. I'm leaving that 10, 20% open just because if I do pass the SIE and if I do move states, whatever, and decide in the future, hey, let me try this again, but only as a private client banker. Then at that point, maybe if I found a great team and I found a good branch and decent training. The problem was there wasn't enough training. I should have been able to shadow some bankers, but they had very few chances of that. There were like 2 days where I was sent to other branches, and I realized those other branches were in a lot better of a spot than we were, and that was a little saddening because I was like, if I was at that branch, that would have been nice. But I don't know. I'm a little sour with my experience. I have certainly worked in toxic environments before where, people would be screaming at you. And in banking, it's a lot more professional. But I had basically similar to a performance review, an interview with certain concerns. And that was when I knew, well, if I don't quit, I'll probably get fired within the next couple months here. They did hire another banker, which was basically got to be my replacement. So at that point, I knew, the writing's on the wall. So see ya, bye-bye. And that's why I'm at the dealership now. So going forward, we will be filming some content when I'm feeling a little bit better. The back's still hurting. We do have a couple Audi videos coming out soon. And, we'll see how it goes. But that's my story. Thanks for watching.